So we're going to take a little journey not far to Berlin, maybe Berlin, as well. Okay, so just to preface this by saying that these are kind of initial thoughts, really on some bread. Can you not hear me? Okay, let's try this. Can you hear me, Georgia? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so just without further ado. Okay, so in 1963, an agreement between the Federal Republic of Germany and the Republic of South Korea allowed 8,000 Korean miners to Germany. And in 1970, a similar agreement brought approximately 10,000 female nurses from Korea. So while about half of the 18,000 remained in Germany permanently, some returned to Korea, and an estimated 1,000 migrated to the US and Canada. For those who chose to settle in Germany, some of them met and married white German partners and had multiracial families. Multiracial people are often conceptualized as being cosmopolitan, progressive embodiments of a kind of post-racial future. In particular, multiracial bodies carry the symbol of being desirable, urban, transgressive, without being threatening. And while the discourse of multiraciality, both in academia and in popular culture, is one that often celebrates a transgressive state of multiracial in-betweenness, of course the reality is that those who are or perceived to be multiracial are still seen as other and considered out of place. In the case of Germany, a multiracial German-Korean diaspora formed out of economic labor migration, as I described, of Korean guest workers or in German Gastarbeiter to cities such as Berlin and Frankfurt, and also the industrial region, North Rhine-Westphalia, of Germany from about 1966 to 1980. Sorry for the slightly goofy pictures. I haven't been cleaned up yet. You can see some pictures I've collected here of, from albums from nurses in general. So, let me share them. Okay, so Germany is considered a relatively recent country where multiraciality has become a recognized phenomenon. Similar to countries such as Canada, the UK, and Japan, relatedly, Germany has been considered and considers itself a monoracial state in opposition to multiracial states such as the claim to multiraciality in places like the US and Canada. Famously, in 2010, Angela Merkel declared that multiculturalism in Germany was dead or had failed. Similar to the UK, politicians have publicly denounced state policies on multiculturalism, citing acts of homegrown terrorism or religious extremism as a tragic result of these failed multicultural policies. The assumption behind such declarations is that minority communities are living parallel lives with each other. Moreover, despite the fact that state multiculturalism policies were actually few and far between, the declaration was about signaling to the country that minority communities were to be blamed for their lack of integration and for a supposedly growing sense of alienation from a seemingly cohesive and singular national culture. In Germany, the use of the terms, really the obsession with the use of the terms successful integration and failed integration, reveals the assumption that migrants have the burden of integration into mainstream monocultural German society. So, based on interviews done with 12 people who are mostly multiracial, and whose heritage is both white and German and Korean, in mostly Berlin, I focus on the strategies and the experiences that my participants have developed to negotiate their sense of selves and their sense of belonging. I have argued that we need to look at the development of multiracial perspectives within and through everyday multiculture. Importantly, everyday multiculture can be understood as a simultaneous process of openness and everyday racism. Multiracial experiences and identities constructed in time and place suggest the metropolitan paradox of being both multiracial and multiracist, of intense conviviality with intense conflict. So I use Jacqueline Brown's concept of diasporic resources, or, quote, the people and places, ideas, ideologies, and iconographies associated with them. Jackie Brown goes on to say that these diasporic resources are not a concrete set of geographic realities, but actually a set of social relations that are constructively enacted and are social spaces constructed in tandem with racial relations. Diaspora through practices and resources become a critical set of tools through which my participants navigate the spaces and their own position. here, Nina, oops, sorry, I was just making it easy for you. Nina exemplifies this by discussing how she developed important friendships during her time in Berlin. And some of these also are translated from German, so there's slight kind of stuff that's, of course, always lost in translation. Okay. She says, I didn't really have Korean friends at home. It started here when I moved to Berlin. It was great. We shared the same experiences, and we talked about it a lot, being half Korean and half German, about how we felt. And we shared the same interests too, and it was comfortable to get to know people with the same background as me, and I started to be proud of being part of two cultures and to know both sides. It was a great time. Here, Brown argues that these diasporic resources are constructed through places and through people. Nina's narration of her time at Fry University, which is what she was talking about here, exemplifies how these resources depend upon the social spaces and diasporic encounters that were made possible via this particular East Asian Studies program that was available at Fry University. So the program offered at Fry and at Frankfurt University draws many students to Berlin who are interested in Korean studies, East Asian studies and culture. Nina narrated how these social spaces enabled her to constitute a diasporic subjectivity. That is, these social spaces and friendships made it possible for Nina to challenge and unpack the kind of strict binary of having to identify as German or other, specifically through a diasporic consciousness that could potentially transcend national and racialized identities. As diaspora scholars have long argued, people like Paul Gilroy, Afton Brock, Claire Alexander, the concept and lived experiences of diaspora have helped to unbind the analysis of cultures from their neat, homogeneous national units. And the ability to speak with others and share these experiences with each other is about making ties that bond that are located very much in the local, in particular spaces and places. Similarly, Mia also, who is at the same program, same university, refers to the importance of this particular space, particular time, and the way that it offered a space for the development of a community. I'll just read it. Okay, the people I met in Berlin at Fry, maybe it's because they come from different cities in Germany, but there's a certain mindset for people who go to different places. And that was really appealing to me. And I always got this feeling that I didn't have that at school. It's like when I was 15, when I started to go out. I had this one friend, we're still in contact. We would always go into the city, we'd pick a club, and we'd go and listen to some amazing music. With her, you could go into the city and do exciting stuff. That's why I'm still good friends with her. With all the other places in school, I only wanted to go out to these suburban, boring places, and the same places all the time. So this is what I had in common with these university people who have a similar mindset. You know, there are lots of students, again, in this program who are Vietnamese, Chinese, also a few half Koreans, like me. But I was also surprised at how many non-Korean students there were. That's also where I met my boyfriend, whose family comes from Vietnam. So as Leon says, the program allowed her to meet people who were Korean or those who had a deep interest in Korean studies and culture. Many of these students were not Korean. Instead, what fascinated both Mia and Nina was in how these students were interested in Korean studies, but who were not ethnically Korean themselves. The diverse makeup of the program highlighted how the city provides a space where difference is actually lived and practiced in the today. After Broad's conception of diaspora space outlines a useful framework of understanding the importance of location and space to these social relations that were being forged. And after Broad, of course, defined diaspora space as one of the, quote, entanglements of genealogies of dispersion with those who stay put. For the native is as much the diaspora, and as is the native. The diaspora space is where boundaries between belonging and otherness, between us and them, are contested. Further, as Dr. Brock had argued, it's in these non-essentialist ways of being and becoming that define diasporic spaces. And this outlines what Dr. Brock calls the critical practice of difference that marks these diasporic spaces. And through this critical practice, these students were engaging in and constituting forms of identification and of affinity that were based on not being the same. And I believe this is extremely significant because it points to how these ties are made that allow for more than just essentialized identifications of ethnic sameness. And Bra makes critical distinctions between categories such as stranger or ajnabi, stranger who one day might be friends, Kair, total stranger, and Atma, one of our own, in her essay, Scent of Memory. And through a critical practice of difference, the category of apna of those who are considered one of our own expands to include those who may start out as strangers, but who ultimately find the promise of friendship and intimacy that are, again, not based on being homogenous and making alliances that are not tied to the nation. Ra explains how this critical practice of difference is constructed through political and intellectual work. For both Mia and Mina, the program can offer this kind of intellectual space where this critical practice of difference is produced. This held the promise of friendship and intimacy, so that their connection was that of the Ashnabi and not of them, the boundaries that exist between strangers who may seem strangers. And just to discuss a little bit about emplacement and diaspora. Howes explains the importance of developing a richer understanding of emplacement through multiple, what he calls multiple sensory modalities that are at work in sensing the city. So in as much as sensory experiences can point to the ways that migrants can produce moods of belonging in new spaces. Iona Dada rightly points out that cities are about sensual experiences as places of sight, sound, smell, and touch. Relatedly, food and food practices are central material tools for emplacement in the city. As Anita Manur has remarked, food serves as a potent and indeed complex symbol that signifies nostalgic desire, but also serves as a kind of palliative for displacement. Moreover, it's in the nostalgic narratives where we can find the, quote, entanglements of the language of food, nostalgia, and desire. For my participants, food served as key symbolic markers of a kind of Korean connection, and also provided a sense of identity and belonging to the land. Here, Mina talks about how much she loves Korean food, how it helps her to remain connected to Korean culture. Mina says, I love the food, even as a kid. We always ate Korean food every day. For lunch, we ate European and German food, but for dinner, we always ate Korean food. My mom was a really good cook. My dad really loved Korean food. And I asked, what are your favorite things to eat? And Mina says, oh, everything. I love kimbap, sundubujigae, samgyeopsal, everything. It's all so good. And here, again, being in Berlin, there's so many Korean restaurants and shops, and there's a growing interest in Korean culture. And this has helped me to struggle less. They also cook Korean food, and I invite friends, especially German friends, to show them what great Korean food is. I try to remember how my mom cooked these dishes. She always said I should learn before she died, but I thought that I would have at least 20 or 30 years. I seem to remember she had a lot of ingredients. So Mina's face and voice changed as she talked about food, and she remembered how she ate Korean food every day. After revealing how she lost her mother 7 years before, she emphasized how much Korean food and cooking was linked to memories of her mother. Mina's love of Korean food was entangled with her desire and nostalgia for her childhood home, and of course her love and interest in Korean food was also very much connected to memories of home. The ability to experience food in the city and to be able to cook Korean food was key to being able to remember and remain connected to her mom. Equally important, the development of these practices in Berlin were critical to how Mina came to understand and get to know other inhabitants in the city, and crucial in getting to know the city itself. In these bodily experiences, taste become a key way to narrate and experience a form of belonging, both with her fellow classmates, who also identified as being Korean, and also with others in the city who are not Korean. Further to this, these constitute a set of important food practices that develop new communities of practice, generated by common endeavor to facilitate local modes of belonging. Learning new sounds, tastes, and smells in these new landscapes and place people into these local spaces and places, and facilitate modes of learning and a sense of belonging. So Mina's recollection of eating Korean food is enacted in order to live and navigate a new and unfamiliar place, and perhaps to make it a home. She engaged in the routine and everyday process of emplacing herself in a new city, in which a place is made meaningful through everyday practices and routine. Making Korean food allowed her to understand the geography of belonging, or diasporic longing to journey in time and space. To get a taste of familiar foods. As Law explains in her work on home cooking in Hong Kong by Filipino domestic workers, a sensory landscape is created for food, eating together, letters, and photographs, and these together produce an alternative sensorium. I would argue that the way that Mina came to know the city and developed social networks created a sensory landscape, and specifically something like an alternative sensorium, where the city can be mapped through a different lens, a lens of diasporic desire, a food that produces local insight in the city. And these embodied experiences provide examples of the somatic work that Reese Taylor and others discussed, referring to the body work that is exerted to make sense of the sensory order of a given cultural location. Equally important is the somatic work invested in getting to know people in the city and thus creating a sensory order of the city. As Reese Taylor pointed out, producing the sensory order in everyday life is invisible and ordinary. And the sensory order is often not at the level of the discursive. So these are not necessarily visible or audible using conventional levels of the discursive. Using conventional sociological methods. Therefore, it remains very important to pay attention to these embodied practices that led to our participants coming to know, understand, and belong in the city. And it's negotiating these spaces and learning to orient oneself in new surroundings. To mean as knowledge under purchased space and place come to constitute embodied subjectivity. Okay. So in Germany and elsewhere, it's still the widely held belief that one cannot belong or identify as German and also be elsewhere. In fact, those who are visibly non-white are constantly subjected to questions of where they are really from, and equally those who identify as multiracial or Germans who are of color who claim to be German are often denied the right to make that claim. The claim to a diasporic and multiracial identity is a way that young people engaging with a set of practices and perspectives that challenge these claims of racial and cultural authenticity. And while claims to racial and ethnic authenticity are negotiated by many people of color, those who are multiracial are also even more suspect because of the perceived ambiguity of their bodies. Therefore, multiracial people often have a double burden of having to prove their authenticity, of never quite being considered to belong, and of always being in between. So in my conversation with Klaus below, he discusses his refusal to describe himself in a way that subscribes to non-racial labels. I asked Klaus, do you ever label yourself as mixed? Klaus says, yes, all the time. Someone asks me if I feel comfortable, I never know what to say. So you know how there are people who say, yeah, I'm British or American, but I never know what to say. How do you feel good? Yes, I have the Korean card, but I grew up German, and there's so many powerful influences around me that were simply German, but it's not something I like or am proud of. So I don't feel German, but I don't feel entirely Asian either. I like that liberty, and I don't like being pushed into that corner. It's much more transient then, so don't even try. Racially, I don't think about it. I think I'm not very aware of my physicality sometimes. I mean, who really thinks that much about what they look like? I don't really think I look fairly Asian for a mixed guy, so I wouldn't have to start in order to describe it. Klaus embodies here a kind of diasporic sense of belonging himself that refuses to be labeled in a way that subscribes to a national identity or even to a local one. Instead, he calls himself a European. The adoption of such a label allows for Klaus to also reject kind of essentialist claims to a racial and ethnic authenticity, thus freeing himself from a racialized identity as a non-racial. Klaus here makes this link between a diasporic identity and a multiracial identity. Klaus, of course, also later admits that this is a function of his own privileged position. As Nandy and Spickard argue, Germany does not have a way of talking about race, despite the fact that race very much determines whether one is seen as an insider of German or whether one is seen as an outsider. Visible markers of racialized difference often determine whether one is considered to be authentically German. Klaus' statement points to the fact that in one sense, he's not always made to feel like he's racially other. At the same time, he's also incredibly ambivalent about claiming Germanness. And this also points to the fact that despite not being dissected and categorized as racially other, he also cannot, or often has not been able to claim authentic Germanness in all instances. By using a racialized framework of stating that he doesn't visibly look Asian, he admits to being able to pass in most instances. Klaus despite never considering his own racial position, claiming to not consider his own racial position, he also always has been made to feel that he was different. So claiming a kind of multiracial perspective, and a diasporic one, allows for Klaus to kind of sidestep the binaries of being authentically German or inauthentic. As Mina points out, I always felt very German as a child. I think I was never accepted as German in German society because I didn't know German. And that was really hard for me. Mina continues by discussing how racism often is also something that is enacted by the non-whites in my people. She said, the thing is, I get racist phrases coming from people that are not white, especially during the war. If I heard something stupid or racist, it's often from Turkish people with migration backgrounds as well. So I would ask myself, why are you talking about that? Because we're in the same boat and experience the same problems. And as Broad discusses, as I mentioned earlier, in Sense of Memory, a critical practice of difference facilitates horizontal modes of alliance and offers the promise of friendship and intimacies with people who are not ethnically the same. At the same time, these categories of stranger, our own, and others also speak to the ways that this othering can happen, this irreducible difference that remains despite sharing things in common, such as political views and political projects, or even, as in this case, being racially positioned in ways that are sometimes similar. Of course, it also speaks to the ways that these racialized hierarchies work in cities like Berlin, and where these histories of migration and one-class intersect with ways to position things differently. White argued that to an extent the church occupied a unique place within German society that suggests both insiderness and outsiderness, in contrast to other racialized non-German ethnic groups who were seen as more straightforwardly foreign and other Ausländer. Moreover, in the immediate aftermath of East and West German reunification, it has been argued that the Turkish were sometimes considered to be co-citizens, or at least Ausländers with more local and long-term presence than newer groups, particularly at that time in East Germany. On the other hand, the mono-minority stereotype of the successful, hardworking, and industrious East Asians were and are still prevalent in Germany, and effectively used to distinguish and shame other minorities, such as the Turkish and Eastern Europeans. Moreover, Asians are considered to be good minorities because they're perceived to have integrated successfully. Of course, what underpins this belief is the cultural logic that Asians are supposedly, culturally speaking, more similar to Germans. And these racialized hierarchies often mask this culture, that position, and pit minorities against each other, and is often internalized by minorities to reflect the complex ties of everyday racism and forms of racialization that are fixed onto bodies in intensely multicultural and ambiguous spaces. These racial tensions are manifested in the racialized encounters that occur in a multicultural city like Berlin on an almost daily basis. Nina's account of racism, particularly by those who are themselves non-white, suggests that the metropolitan paradox of racism and conviviality are intensely real in these encounters, where the violence of being asked, where are you from, and what are you, dissect her, using this belief in a kind of racial truth. Okay, to conclude, in this presentation, I've argued that there needs to be a way of discussing how multiracial people develop and draw upon a range of diasporic resources to help them negotiate a more plural, multiply located sense of self and identity. And these resources enable my participants to circumvent and challenge the strict binaries of being German, non-German, based on essentialist notions of the law. I discuss how everyday multicultural in the city is present in the creation of these diasporic resources, the encounters, the friendships, and intimacies that are made possible in the city. Okay.